Oh, apparently we're starting. I was just watching the special effects. We've done this show before, and we're going to repeat it because now we have some marvelous Raven special effects, and I was kind of just watching them. Well, we have two fabulous people in our control room, Alex Silva-Satter and Bryce Parker. And today we're repeating the show Ravens because we now have better ravens. And you already saw one of the ravens that I just sort of got enamored with. Well, ravens or crows, because they're so closely related, are part of history. They're part of Greek mythology, Roman mythology, and of course the British Isles mythology pre-Christian. And we're going to read two poems today, pre-Christian. One is called The Three Ravens. Isn't that clever? How did they think of that title? And it has in it a deer. The deer in pre-Christian mythology in the British Isles was a symbol of rebirth. They use that in the Harry Potter movie, if you recall your Harry Potter movies. It's also a symbol of a woman who can become a deer through magic. It's all very poetic. And there is that deer in this poem. We have a few words in the poem that have changed from having a meaning to now being strange to us. And I'm going to go over those now. One of them is the word nigh. Dare him come nigh. That means near. And then, and carried him to earthen lake. Earthen lake is a grave. Okay, and then in the last line, and such a leman. That means a lover. So those are the words in this English ballad that you may not be familiar with. And we're going to start with the English ballad, and then we're going to read a Scottish ballad, and then we're going to read a poem that was written during the time 1840 to 1910, when Mark Twain was alive. It's going to be interesting. Notice I haven't said who the author was, but you've probably already guessed. Well, let's start with The Three Ravens. The author is anonymous, that famous Mr. Anonymous. It's an English ballad. There were three ravens sat on a tree, down a down, hey down, hey down. There were three ravens sat on a tree with a down. There were three ravens sat on a tree. They were as black as they could be. With a down, derry, 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 down, down. And one of them said to his mate, where shall we our breakfast take? Down in yonder green field there lies a knight slain under his shield. His hounds they lie down at his feet, so well they can their master keep. His hawks they fly so eagerly, there's no fowl dare him come nigh. Down there comes a fallow doe, as great with young as she might go. She lift up her bloody head and kissed his wounds that were so red. She got him up upon her back and carried him to earthen lake. She buried him before the prime she was dead herself ere evensong time. God send every gentleman such hawks, such hounds, and such a layman. There was one word I didn't tell you the definition of. She buried him before the prime. That means dawn. So she buried him before dawn. And she herself dead ere evensong time. And that would be the evening. So here we have this magical woman who transforms herself into a deer and carries him to his next life. It's really very beautiful, isn't it? It's a lovely ballad. And of course, that's why it's still with us today. And now we're going to read the Scottish version. And of course, the Scots have a more fierce tradition. So now we're going to read the Trois Corbies. Now, if you know your French, un, deux, trois, that means the three corbies, and corbies are crows. So there's a lot of interaction between mainland Europe, France, and the British Isles, because they're using a French word. So there's your proof right there that there was interaction. My guess is they were all going everywhere for food. It was a very hard life back then. Well, let's talk about some of these words. Walking all alane, that's all alone. And notice how similar the word is. Alane, alone. And yon owl foul dyke, that's a turf wall, pile of dirt that makes a wall. And naebody kens, and we still use the word ken today. It means know, like K-N-O-W, and nobody knows, nobody kens. The wildfowl hame. Hame is home, and that's close enough, and you can see how that could change over time. May make our dinner sweet. Make our dinner sweet. Housebane, a white housebane. Now, bane is easy to understand as a bone, but hus, that seems to be house, but it isn't. It's neck. And how house and neck, well, I can't follow that one. Usually they're logical. And then his bonny blue een. That, of course, is his eye. The wind shall blow. That one's obvious, isn't it? The wind should blow. There are always these little differences in pronunciation as people pronounce things differently over the years. And we're now going to read this Scottish ballad. It's another anonymous author, Mr. Famous Anonymous. It's the Trois Corbies. As I was walking all alane, I heard twa corbies making a main. The tane unto the other say, where shall we gang and dine today? In behind yon old foul dyke, I wot there lies a new slain knight, and naebody kens that he lies there but his hawk, his hound, and lady fair. His hound is to the hunting gane, his hawk to fetch the wild fowl hame, his lady taken another mate, so we may make our dinner swate. You'll sit on his white housebane, and I'll pike out his bonny blue een. Wi' a lock of his gowden hair, we'll dig our nest when it grows bare. Mony a one for him makes main, but nane shall ken where he is gane, or his white banes when they are bare, the wind shall blow forevermore. Now there's an interesting clue. We mentioned that someone who was writing during the time when Mark Twain lived probably read these ballads. You've guessed it. I know you have. It's Edgar Allan Poe. Now, Edgar Allan Poe grew up in a theatrical family that didn't have much money. So he was adopted by a wealthy couple who gave him every opportunity. He had the best education someone of that time could have, so he knew his Greek and Roman mythology. He knew his British Isles prehistory. He knew all of those things, and you can hear it in his poem that we'll read today. Mark Twain, of course, grew up in Missouri. His family didn't have much money, and he had to go to work early. But he was someone who read his dictionary, and every once in a while he'll pluck out a word from this thick old dictionary he had, and he'll plop it down in one of his stories, and we have to go look it up and find out what he means. But of course, Edgar Allan Poe was comfortable with all these dictionary words and mythology words. He was from an elevated education. And we're going to hear all of that here today. And you're going to hear that word, the last word of the Scottish ballad, turned into something else, which very often authors do. So here we go with The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. And of course, we're going to have some very special effects that I'm looking forward to, as I'm sure you are too. We want to thank Alex Silva-Satter and Bryce Parker in the control room for all the magic they're going to do today. Here we go, The Raven. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as if someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this, and nothing more." Ah, distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I sought to borrow from my book's surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels named Lenore. Nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore, but the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you." Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token. And the only word there spoken was the whispered word, Lenore. This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, Lenore. Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping, somewhat louder than before. Surely, said I, surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then, that thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more. Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mane of lord or lady, perched above my chamber door, perched above the bust of Pallas, above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird, beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore, though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, are sure no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's plutonium shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore, for we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird upon his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust upon his chamber door, with such a name as Nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on the pallid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing farther than he uttered, not a further than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, other friends have flown before. On the morrow, he will leave me as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said, nevermore. Startled at the stillness broken by replies so aptly spoken, doubtless I said, what it utters is only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast, and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of nevermore. But the raven still beguiling all my fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking I betook myself to linking fancy into fancy, thinking that this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease inclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er she shall press, nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he has sent thee, respite, respite and nepenthe from my memories of Lenore. Quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempest sent or whether tempest tossed, thee here ashore, desolate, yet all undaunted, on this desert island enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, but that heaven that bends above us by that God we both adore. Tell this soul with sorrow laven, within the distant Aidenn it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting, get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor, and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. Well, there's a poem by Edgar Allan Poe, The Raven, and we had some wonderful visuals, and we thank everyone in the control room for that. This is a poem written by a well-educated man of the time, heavy reference to mythologies, heavy use of obscure words, but it's still a wonderful, wonderful, magical poem. And did you notice that nevermore? Does it hark back to an old ballad? Let's read that last line again. The Scottish ballad. the wind shall blow forevermore. Obviously, Edgar Allan Poe was a very well-read person. The only problem with someone like Edgar Allan Poe, this terribly gifted person who came from a theatrical family and was adopted by wealthy people and given every educational opportunity, every social opportunity, placed in good employment, every door was open to him. But with him he carried some weaknesses. We don't know what caused the weaknesses, if they're genetic or from his experiences, but he had a weakness for alcohol and he had a weakness for drugs. And all of those were very available back in the 1800s. Now, Mark Twain was a different character. In his youth, he did drink. It was pretty much accepted. Later on, he became a very conventional person who liked a fine dinner, who married a woman he loved, who loved him, and they had children, and they loved their children, and they were a very conventional family. And it wasn't until much later that sadnesses happened. But all during his strong times, his youth times, he was pretty much a healthy person who ate well and shared the company of friends and sat around campfires telling stories. So whatever it was, whether genetic or environmental or some tragedy, maybe there really was a Lenore for Edgar Allan Poe who died, and he just never got over it and carried the scars to his grave. We don't know. But it's all very interesting. It's interesting to compare the two. They lived at the same time. I think that's very hard for us to accept. And that's why I think we should read those two together. So it's up to you to get yourself The Jumping Frog of Calaveras County, and then read The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. And that's our show for today. We thank you for tuning in, and we thank our people in the control room for our wonderful ravens. Look for your blessings. They're there. Bye-bye. See you next week.